Hello, everyone. It all started when I was messing with this. Everything we're gonna see is real.
We are talking about the movie Possession Diaries. This one comes out on the 4th of June, and this one stars Katherine Munroe as Rebecca and is directed and co-written by Juan Frausto. Now, this is obviously a possession movie, and it really chronicles the story of this young girl called Rebecca, Becky, as she is possessed after doing a Ouija board. And she has decided that she is possessed by some type of demonic entity. And she's been to doctors and priests and stuff, and no one kind of believes her. So her only option is trying to chronicle the possession via a kind of video journal on her computer. So this movie all takes place in one room, one kind of like room in sort of an apartment block or something like that, I'm assuming. And it's done through a mix of like a webcam. So in some aspects it's a found footage movie, but there are probably about half the shots that are filmed in the traditional style, kind of like, you know, third party camera or whatever. So it's not really a found footage movie, although there are kind of sequences that are filmed through the webcam, so to speak. So it's kind of a hybrid between the two. And it's her trying to obviously kind of deal with this, and we see the kind of the possession slowly starting to happen, and ultimately trying to get help through a means. There's a kind of a psychic who is kind of like, he's put in contact with her, who comes with a priest played by the really kind of the only named actor here, James Russo, in a kind of a sequence about 2/3 of the way through. So that's all I'll say about the plot here. Let's talk about Possession Diaries. Obviously a low budget indie flick, so obviously it doesn't have the kind of the budget to do anything too kind of grandiose. But first of all, what's worked for me? I would say this movie has a trump card. But let's talk about that first of all. For me, there's loads of possession films. I mean, they're relatively inexpensive to make in regards to a kind of a horror style movie, and people are aware of, you know, it and kind of how they work. But for me, you always see the possessed person in these movies from like a third party. Your POV character is normally from the Exorcist or someone related to the kind of the possessed person. For my money, this movie does something original in this crowded genre, and that is almost put you on the POV of the person being possessed. And I feel it does an admirable job here of kind of showing you this kind of this mental anguish and the kind of the slipping of the sanity throughout this kind of as the film progresses, and ultimately becomes kind of more powerful. The demon becomes kind of has more of a grip on her as the kind of as the films kind of goes on. And I don't really remember seeing. I mean, there may well be, but off the top of my head, I don't remember really seeing a movie from the point of view of the person that's getting possessed. It's the kind of the main character. And this is your kind of your point of entry, and kind of having it so you are seeing the process of it being possessed from kind of, I mean, if you've seen the kind of like the Conjuring, you know, the kind of the 3 stages of possession, which escaped me off the top of my head, but the oppression, all of this. So it's kind of an interesting way to do it. The other thing, obviously, it being kind of a somewhat of a found footage movie, it kind of falls within that kind of like style of movie as well. There are a couple of creepy sequences. Now the VFX are minimal, but I did like there's like a shadowy figure that kind of is very subtle and kind of appears here and there, and I think it's actually quite effective. But you've got to say, you may well miss it because it is very subtle, but I actually kind of quite liked it. And the use of the kind of the sound and music here, I also think is very well done and adds credence to a kind of a very creepy and kind of oppressive atmosphere within this movie. The main actress herself, I'm kind of a little conflicted on. because I felt her acting was a little bit up and down in the movie. There are sequences here, and there are portions of this movie where I felt her acting was very good. She comes across as a real person, and does a good job of kind of selling you this anguish that she's kind of going through. But there are also sequences where I feel her acting slips a little bit, and I feel sometimes it's maybe the dialogue that's written to a certain degree, and there's something else that leads me to believe that, which I'll come on to in a second. But overall, I feel the acting on her part, it probably falls more into the kind of the positive than the negative. But there are just a few sequences here and there where I thought her delivery was just a little bit off and seemed a little bit kind of, you know, a little bit doesn't ring quite true on occasions. Which leads me on to the kind of the some of the negatives here. So for me, the actual, outside of this kind of shadowy figure, the actual demonic side of things, I feel are not great in some way areas. Now the main way this will kind of have the communication with this demon is through the telephone. So what happens is that the phone keeps ringing, and there's a demonic voice on the phone, and the dialogue in those sequences is terrible, and it even quotes Mortal Kombat in a line. See if you can guess what it is. But yeah, the actual dialogue and the way the voice is, it just sounds a little crappy, if you ask me. So I didn't like that in regards to it. There's also a dream sequence where we kind of see a demonic visage, and again, this didn't work for me. I felt they would have gone for maybe something a little bit more subtle. I feel would have been the best way to, I would say, maybe a hooded, or you can't really see, something like this, something with a mask on. What we actually ended up with, I didn't think was particularly good. Now, I've mentioned obviously our main actress, and to be honest with you, it's her 99% of the time. There are a couple of other characters that will kind of come in, and some are perfectly fine. Her friend, I think her boyfriend does a good job, especially when he gets pissed off. You really feel like he's, you know, probably in the moment there. But there's a psychic that turns up that way overacts. It's not in the movie a lot, but it's like I've said, some of these supporting characters don't do the best job. Again, it's a little bit of a mixed bag. And I have to say, the conceit here of having this really all set in one room, and a lot of the time set in the same camera angle, makes it not a particularly visually interesting movie. So there's not a lot going on here, and you'll kind of feel that obviously as a piece of entertainment you are watching on a screen, it's not particularly visually stimulating. Now that might not bother some people, and I don't think this movie it's not its main issue here, but it's not particularly you know, visually arresting, and there's not a lot of VFX here down to I'm assuming the budget. But for me, I mean, there's loads of possession films, and I've got to say, this one at least does have like I've said, a unique voice in a very crowded genre, and some of the kind of the makeup effects as well. Again, they're kind of quite subtle. I like the fact they kind of like dialed back and made it a very gradual process. I feel works in the movie's benefit. So. Given the fact I do have a few problems, but I still feel for a low budget kind of possession movie, it's probably a little bit above average for me. So I will actually give this one a 6 out of 10, because I do feel that there's probably enough here, if you are a fan of low budget horror and possession movies, that it kind of gives you something a little bit new, and kind of maybe a style of a possession movie that isn't completely kind of worn out, and gives you a little bit of a fresh take on it. So 6 out of 10 for me. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.